Hello, and welcome to the FI Entrepreneur, Financial Planning for the Risk Taker. This podcast will show you how to achieve FI through entrepreneurial pursuits by developing a well-calibrated and thought-out plan for risk management so that you can maximize the rewards.
Hosted by certified financial planner, enrolled agent, and serial entrepreneur Ben Martinek, this is the FI Entrepreneur, Financial Planning for the Risk Taker.
The information presented in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. None of the content is presented as investment advice. Consult your financial professional before acting on any of the information presented in this show.
Welcome, everyone, to the Financial Independence Entrepreneur Podcast. We're happy to be here again. In the last few episodes, we've discussed a lot of the softer topics of financial independence and entrepreneurship. And you may be thinking, you guys are financial planners. When are you going to get into the meat of anything? Well, today, the gloves are coming off. It's time to get serious. And we're going to focus on some of the really measurable things that you would want to think about as you're approaching financial independence and as you're thinking about entrepreneurship. What are those things that you can really measure to say, are you ready? Is it time to jump into these two really life-changing parts of life? And with that, Ben, what are the things that you think are the most important in deciding if you're ready for financial independence and ready to jump into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me here, Andrew. So there's a couple different ways. One is, let's recognize that there's different pathways to financial independence, FI. What we're going to kind of go over today is more of the conventional pathway that's often discussed. One is described as the crockpot methodology. What we ultimately are about as the FI entrepreneur is entrepreneurship. And so we do want to move into and discuss entrepreneurship as a pathway because we think that's rather unique and really the best suited way. But we feel that to not talk about the more conventional methodology would be to only be a mistake. So what we want to get into the basic metrics of what you would see within a more conventional approach towards financial independence, which generally speaking is simply saving a large sum of money through the capital markets, invested in stocks and bonds, and then living off of those assets in perpetuity, and then figuring out how to do so, to distribute your assets, your income from that portfolio, which more or less is what takes place in retirement, except we're accelerating that goal to rather taking place in your age 60s and 65. We're not going to do it maybe in your mid 30s or something. And so there are a unique set of circumstances takes place if you're shooting to achieve financial independence, or we might call early retirement, into your 30s and 40s. So the biggest item, regardless, I think the common aspect to actually get into the metrics is your savings rate. We can't do anything for you. You can't do anything for yourself unless you're saving money. And really probably the biggest landmark article in the FI space that if you haven't read or you're not aware of or not familiar with, you should, because it's like the gateway into this space, is Mr. Money Mustache's article, The Shockingly Simple Math Behind Early Retirement. It was written back in 2012. And this thing's just a gold nugget. And again, what's fascinating about this is not his original inspiration. This goes back to Early Retirement Extreme by Jacob Lundfisker, who I think was the one who really just gave this idea to Mr. Money Mustache. But this is, a lesson in business is you might be the one who originates with the idea, but it's the marketer, the person who gets that message out there, who's the one who gets all the credit. So don't you think? Isn't that the truth, Andrew?
Always. You could have the best idea in the world, but if you don't make it pretty, no one cares.
Yeah. So Jacob Lundfisker, God bless him, he's living as a hermit in a bus out in San Francisco or something, living on next to nothing. I really don't think that's an extreme. Again, he's early retirement extreme. If you really want to see the initial inspiration.
So he's doing skeletal FI, right?
No lean.
Talked about lean FI, fat FI. Lundquist is in the bus. He's a step above the Call of the Wild dude, right?
That might not be an exaggeration. I actually love if we could get Jacob.
As long as he's happy.
If we could get Jacob on the show, that would be cool because he's definitely his own unique character.
Well, we'll call him. If he's got, we'll hook up the soup cans with the wires and see if we could get him on the phone.
Yeah, we'll have to send him maybe a pigeon message or something.
Yeah.
Right? Let's see. We don't know if we can communicate with cell phone or the internet. None of that's true. He has quite the blog. You guys should check him out. It's really robust information.
The rabbit hole has been dug early in this episode.
Well, so Mr. Money Mustache, though, took some of Jacob's ideas and ran with them and really started, well, Mr. Money Mustache. And so the shockingly simple math behind early retirement is your savings rate. Really, it is shocking. If you're not familiar with this, it'll blow your mind. A lot of folks wonder, why do we have maybe these common rules of thumb that save 15% of your income and you can retire by 65? Well, the simple reality is that's actually how the math works.
Yeah.
Like if you save 15% of your income, you'll finally have enough money to be able to retire when you're 65. The critical thing is if you're only saving 15% of your income, that means the other 85% is being used for living purposes. Not all of it. Some of this has to go away in taxes, but that other 85% is what you're accustomed to living. It's what supports your standard of living. And we need, unless we want to go through a really big transition from our working life and the life that's being supported while working to, our retirement life, if we don't want to have a significant transition there, we need to save enough money that can continue to support that 85% roughly of spending. And if you're only putting aside 15% over time, it takes, roughly 40 years before you are going to have saved enough at that 15% savings rate. And if it takes roughly 40 years and you start in your early to mid 20s, here we go. Now you're retiring at age 65. And so the fascinating insight that Jacob Lunkfisker again said was like, well, why don't we just bump up the savings rate? We don't have to keep it at 15%, right? Andrew, you had a thought there. Why don't you chime in on that?
Well, I'm of course familiar with Mr. Money Mustache, and savings rate really is that holy grail of financial independence. And that's what everyone's like, oh, I'm saving 50%, I'm saving 25%. But there is that trade-off that happens. How much can you save and how much do you sacrifice to save that much? And what I really keyed into what you were talking about was like that idea of transition. How much are you able to save? How many years does that cut off of your FI number? And then also, is that going to be sustainable? So you might want to live in a van down by the river, or you might not want to do that. But as long as you're able to have a savings rate that gets you there, maybe mentally you're like, all right, I'm going to live the next 10 years really lean and save 50% of my income. And then after that, I'm going to fatten things up a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of meat on the chickens before I slaughter them and stop working or whatever you want to do. The percentages are really interesting for me.
Andrew, you'd have to do a little more than 10 years if you were going to do only 50%. It'd be according to the math. And now this presumes how much are you distributing from the portfolio? Mr. Money Mustache, and I think ultimately Jacob Lunkfisker presumes a 4% safe withdrawal rate. It also presumes a certain inflation level on your investments after the rate of inflation. So what's called your real rate of return. He was presuming around 5%. So there are some baked in assumptions to the rest of this chart that I'm going to share with you. I do think these are probably fairly safe or good assumptions to work with, but recognize that these numbers can change one direction or the other depending on what your underlying assumptions are. But yeah, if you saved 50% of your income, you could retire conceivably in 17 years. You bump up that savings rate to say, let's 75%. Now that'd be a heck of a lot of savings. I don't know if there's anybody who could really fully pull it off because you still have to go and pay taxes on your income. But 75%.
All right, I got to stop you.
Go ahead. What are you thinking, Andrew?
I'm like, you're pulling numbers out of nowhere. How do you come up with this? Where you're saying if you save 50%, you can retire in 17 years. Like, where is this math coming from?
It's the article, Andrew. It's Mr. Money Mustache.
It's the article.
It's the shockingly simple math. Just go to the article, everybody.
For all the people that don't have video in front of them, like I'm staring at Ben right now and he's got nothing in front of him. And he's just like, these numbers are coming out of nowhere. Like, where?
Right.
Like, how does this happen?
I have these saved away, Andrew. I just know it. You didn't get that download when you became a financial advisor?
No, I certainly did not.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, these are the repository of Ben's mental library that just, yeah.
Haven't you seen The Matrix? You just like put it in your head and like all of a sudden you got all this stuff.
He took both the blue pill and the red pill.
That's what
and he's operating on both sides of the screen, yes.
Go to this article, folks. Mr. Money Mustache, the shockingly simple math behind early retirement, written in 2012.
I'm going to have to do my homework before the next
Oh,
episode.
please do. Yeah, take a look at this. I mean, it was an eye-opener too, when I saw this. It blows your mind. If you wanted to try to get into early retirement within a decade, I mean, this is definitely at the height of insanity to even try to pull this off. If you saved 75% of your income, you could retire in 7 years. And again, the ratio, the reason why this works is if you're saving 75%, that means you're only living on 25. And saying you live on 25 is probably pretty generous because, again, taxes have to go out of somewhere. So you're paying taxes out of that out of that 25%. You're probably actually living on 5% or something or less. So, I mean, I don't know how anyone would make this work. But, conceivably, according to Mr. Money Mustache's math, 7 years. So, yeah, I mean, how soon do you want to get there? This is the whole notion of lean FI. Like, man, if I just save a ton of money, as much as I possibly can, I don't have to work anymore. You can ring the bell, financial independence, game over. So super cool.
Sure.
Now, realistically, where we see most people when it comes to savings is probably around 25 to 50%. And in fact, we've even dubbed people within this line of work that if you're saving more than 25%, you're a super saver.
Yeah.
So something to shoot for, you can pat yourself on the back. I'm doing 25% or more. I'm a super saver. But 25 to 50 is probably what we would see most commonly. And it's perhaps more of a realistic goal because it truly would be almost Herculean to pull off anything excess of 50%. One might wonder why you even work. What do you think, Andrew? Do you think you could save more than 50% of your income and be okay with that?
For me, here, I'm out in South Korea where the cost of living is much lower. I'm taking advantage of geo arbitrage. Maybe. Would I want to save more than 50%? No. I want to take vacations. I want to do this. I want to do that. So for me, it's not worth it. I would probably choose to work an extra 5 or 10 years and enjoy my life more during that time. And that's always that idea of these trade-offs, right? How much do you want to save? How early do you want to retire? And what does that look like for you?
So this is the conventional approach, folks, to early retirement. We are going to just save a bunch of money, put it all into the markets. Mm-hmm. We'll have to talk about why we think that's a good investment someday or a good choice, but we fundamentally see it as us taking a bet or banking on capitalism and that ultimately the future is going to be better tomorrow than it is today. And as long as you believe that, I think you can take these broad market bets and trust that your money's going to grow and be there to be able to pull income from at a future point in time and not live in a constant state of fear and anxiety. It tends to be the case in this space that if you don't believe those or you have concerns or hesitations, you pivot to real estate instead because it's more tangible and people, maybe they get to know their tenants or it can be landlords. They just simply like the tangibility of it, would rather make a bet in that space rather than a bet on capitalism. But I'm pretty sold. Maybe I'm just an investment advisor, but I'm pretty sold ultimately on the bet that capitalism will continue to work for us. Not to suggest it's perfect or it doesn't have its blemishes, but I do think it works. And I think it'll continue to work for us. It's reliable in that regard. So savings rate is a critical factor. But, to get to Andrew's point just a moment ago, this is really where entrepreneurship, I think, is just an unexplored territory. And why we have this podcast is because most folks, once they come into early retirement or saving this way, they don't want to spend the rest of their life out on a beach or sailing in blue water. I mean, they want something to do and they want some combination of things to do. They want a more balanced arrangement of leisure and work. If there's a common critique that I hear as we work with people is I just work too much. Mm-hmm. It's too stressful. It's too demanding. I don't hate the work. I just don't want to only work. And unfortunately, I do think a critique we can have of the modern age is that all of us feel like we're working more than what we want to be. So the hope within financial independence via entrepreneurship is we can simply create our own business, have greater control of our own destiny, maintain a degree once we achieve financial independence through our business, where we can decide how much to work, how much not to work, and now have an asset that's very tangible. We're not necessarily taking this bet on capitalism, we're taking a bet on ourselves and the future prospects of our business as what's going to be the continued source of our income into retirement. So super cool. Really wanting to get more into the details of that as an option. But today's show is about more conventional approaches, the shockingly simple math of savings rates. And just if you like this podcast, you're not sure if entrepreneurship is for you, but FI is for you. Look, you can still do the conventional approach. And I think that's fine. Let's just save a bunch of money or maybe let's get some rental properties and fundamentally have a business of rental properties. But, the savings rate, Andrew, isn't the only thing, right? It goes on. And what else do we need to achieve financial independence? What are we going to share with our listeners?
There's another couple of things. So certainly you want to start with the savings rate, and then you move on. You want to look at a couple of things, and we can dip into either one of these. You want to be measuring your net worth over time, right? You want to make sure that as you're taking these moves, that you're growing income and not taking steps backwards. However you're pursuing it, you want to make sure that you're moving forward. And a lot of people really, they don't take in these check-ins every 6 months or every 1 year. They just kind of move forward unconsciously. And if you're not measuring it for yourself, then it really doesn't matter. You can't really see what's happening. You don't know if you're actually making progress. So there's that. Another thing is the use of debt.
Before we jump into that, Andrew, that's going to be a great conversation, please.
I feel like we've got enough for 2 episodes here, right?
All right. Well, hold on, folks. This might be a long one. No. I mean, tracking is important. We feel working towards these goals is a lot like going from England over to the United States, right? Back in the day when you had to sail, we're dealing with the daily grind and every day is the same. And each day we look out, it's like nothing changes. It's just all blue ocean all the way around. And, the reality is that those boats are moving across the ocean.
Sure. When you're in the middle of it, you can't see the land.
Yeah, you are making traction. You are making headway, but emotionally, it can be incredibly draining. You don't feel it. That's why we track.
Sure.
I know of plenty of people who have done very well for themselves without paying a whole lot of attention to this tracking. But usually they show up at our door at some point and say, I have no idea where I'm at. Like, are we in a good place? Is this a good trajectory?
Like, I've been making a lot of money for the last 10, 20, 30 years. I don't feel like the dial is moving. I don't know where I'm going. And it really is like sailing without a compass.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's like sailing by the stars, or, I'm not much of a navigator.
We'll work on it, Andrew. One day.
We got to work on our nautical analogies here.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there actually is a human propensity. I wrote my master's thesis on this. We won't go down this rabbit hole. This would be a fascinating conversation. There is a propensity amongst human beings.
We got to get a copy of that.
Oh, I don't know if we should publicly distribute that, but it's fun to talk about. It's more of a showpiece. Let's not show it too much.
It's on the shelf behind you, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's just in case you wanted to know. I'll pull it off the shelf as needed. No, it's all about orientation and our propensity, actually, as humans, to go in circles. If you're not aware of this, Andrew, I don't know if you are. We do.
Oh no, I've never felt that way.
No, that's right. We do. People who are lost out in the woods, I mean, they've documented this in a number of studies, will consistently go in one big circle.
Yeah.
I mean, they feel like they're going somewhere because they're walking through the woods and obviously they're moving, but they actually aren't. They're just going in one big circle. So, why do we track this stuff? I mean, it's a process of identifying landmarks, milestones, points of orientation to see, one, emotionally, that yes, we are making progress. We can feel satisfied with it. But two, we want to make sure we aren't just spinning our wheels and we've spent our whole life working only to find out that we don't really have anything to show for it.
Sure.
It never came to anything. I wasn't paying attention. Yeah, don't underestimate this. Like, it's real. Like, natural habits of humans is to go in circles when out in the wilderness. As crazy as that sounds. What are your thoughts to that, Andrew? Isn't that nutso?
I've heard things similar to that. And so really these ideas of savings rate, measuring net worth over time, these are metaphorical landmarks on our journey towards financial independence, right? Like making sure that this is where we're going and we're moving in the right direction rather than just like stumbling over our right foot over and over again. And concentric circles might get you forward, but it's much better to go in a straight line.
Yeah, it's not very effective to meander. Right? It's not as good as a straight line, right?
Yeah, especially if you're driven towards financial independence. You want to get it done as quickly as possible and use the resources that you have at your disposal to the maximum amount of efficiency.
Yep. So we need to get into debt. And I don't want to go and side rail this again too much, but the challenge with, I think, that folks, as they move towards financial independence and they're really concerned about savings and saving every dollar they can, is that they're too concerned about saving. They're not okay with spending. Like, part of this whole use of money is learning how to do both.
Sure.
I think you need to know how to save your money, but you need to be okay with spending it too. Like, the whole point of this is to eventually spend the money anyhow. And, we don't want to live a whole life where we're so obsessed with saving that to spend it feels wrong. Like, well, I don't know, just go work or something. I mean, like, what? We need to learn how to spend the money too.
Yeah, you don't want to end your life with a gilded tomb, right? I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you've got really grand legacy desires, but hopefully you want to have some enjoyment during your life. And there's also that thing where you get a lot of these super savers that they save and save and save, and then once they quote unquote retire, things kind of hit the fan. And they just like turn this switch and just start spending.
Yeah.
Because they've kind of repressed all these urges for so long. They're like, oh, I've hit it. And they throw the buoys off of the boat, to continue our sailing analogies, which obviously I know nothing about. And like just start spending and spending and spending. And maybe they wake up 5 years after that and they look at their investment portfolio and say, oh, I may have gone too far. And that kind of goes also into that safe withdrawal rate, which is definitely something I think that we need to touch upon.
Yes. You already brought up debt. I want to talk about a little bit about debt before we touch into this whole notion of a safe withdrawal rate.
Yes.
And how that comes into play in these considerations.
Yeah, debt is hugely important. Debt is a tool. And there's so many perspectives on debt. There's consumer debt, there's good debt, there's bad debt. And a lot of this is just like really perspective. And so as a person like yourself, that you've taken out a lot of business debt, you've taken out personal debt, how do you as a financial planner view debt? What should we be considering when we start taking out debt?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I would say I've taken out a lot.
I knew you were going to key into that. Yeah,
I've taken out a lot of debt.
Ben is up to his eyebrows in debt.
Watch out, everybody. We're in trouble.
With the show notes on this, we're going to put Ben's credit report so you can see what's going on.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. All right.
Trust me, Ben's credit score is 850.
I think it is, actually. Yeah, we're very good. The banks love us. Yeah, we're good customers. Yeah, we make our payments on time and we're never late. Oh, yeah, we should talk about credit scores and all this other jazz, but we won't. We'll save that for another episode. But yeah, I mean, it's debt bad. I mean, you obviously have big radio personalities. I mean, are we okay to say Dave Ramsey?
Sure.
I actually like Dave. There's a lot of good things he has to offer and say. And
careful, he's got a legal team.
Nah, well, he does that. He's definitely got more of a legal team than I do. Yeah, so I'll call my attorney and tell him to prepare himself.
If Dave Ramsey comes after us, I'm going to consider that we've succeeded. We can shut down the podcast and I'm done.
Oh, there you go. We're on the radar of Dave Ramsey. We're doing something right.
We should just keep saying it.
No, Dave's great. I mean, if someone had to choose someone and be like, hey, I want to listen to someone, I think Dave will steer you right most of the way. I don't love his zero debt approach.
Sure.
And the crazy thing, the reason why I don't love it is that fundamentally, when you invest in the markets, you can either invest in equities, stocks, and be an owner of a company, or you can invest by being a bondholder, which means you're lending money to companies. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. We say debt, and I just feel like that has such a negative connotation to it because really it's financing. When you take on a mortgage or have this obligation, you've asked someone else to give you money in hopes that you can now repurpose that money to oftentimes be a catalyst to accelerate your own entrepreneurial situation. Or maybe, I don't know, just buy a house. You don't have the money. You don't want to wait to save up all that money. Of course, you have an obligation to that, but this person is, they're making money off the deal and they're lending it over to you. And it's just another form of capital.
Yeah.
It's how capitalism works. And so I feel like we're being lopsided if we're all about equity and stock ownership, but we're like, oh, debt's so bad. Stay away from it. It's ugly. It'll hurt you. Like, I just don't think that's true. Now, it can be bad, and it certainly can be helpful. I don't think anybody should ever have consumer debt. That's just bad.
Like not running credit card balances, right? We don't want to do that.
Yeah. Do not keep a balance on your credit cards. And truthfully, maybe don't even have a credit card. I mean, there's some folks, you're just better off not having them. And that'll be decided on a case-by-case scenario. But yeah, keeping a balance on a credit card is almost 99% of the time is a bad idea. There's maybe one small exception I'd give to it. I won't even share because I don't want to give anyone ideas. But
I'm actually really curious right now.
You want to know what?
Yes.
Well, that's called a teaser.
Yeah, you can't do that.
That's a teaser, man.
That's such a teaser. On the next episode of the Financial Independence Entrepreneur, like how should you use a credit card?
You'll have to tune in.
I feel like Ben is credit card point hacking here.
Yeah, maybe. That's where I got all my debt. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we have taken out some business loans in anticipation of future growth and to help bring us there to kind of fill in actually our own growth to make it smoother rather than, boy, I don't want to say volatile, but more plateauy, let's say, where we pent up years of getting to a certain point that we could have ultimately gotten ourselves there too by the correct utilization of debt. So is debt bad or wrong?
No.
Absolutely not. I mean, so many people have this thing of like, oh, I got to get rid of all my debt. Let's pay the mortgage off because it's like an evil boogeyman monster in your bed. I mean, like,
Yeah.
what's the deal? What do you think, Andrew?
That's the thing. Like, there is this really inherent or just a really deep seated place in a lot of people's lives where any kind of debt they think is just terrible. And we've had people in our lives, and I know people personally, where they've got really low interest debt with large balances. And we've had that conversation. You know, these are personal friends of mine. And they say, Andrew, what should I do with my debt? And I'm like, leave it there. Like, your interest rate is like 1.5%. You've got such a good deal. You don't even have to think about that debt. The payments are low. It's not affecting your cash flow. Take your money, invest it in the stock market, do what you want with it as long as it's debt and those payments are not affecting your cash flow. And they say to me, oh no, I've got to get rid of it. And at a certain point, it's their ability to sleep at night. But I don't want to say it, but it's the wrong decision. Like, it's not a good decision. And if you look at it in a holistic way, in your whole financial picture, it can be a beneficial thing, especially if you're in a situation where the asset associated with debt, education, real estate, entrepreneurship, those for me are good uses of debt. You're investing in yourself, you're investing in assets that are going to produce income for you either now or in the future. And you're also acquiring that debt at a low enough interest rate where it's not a drag on your overall financial health.
It's the financing charges.
Yes. What are you paying for this debt? That's a very important question.
I mean, it's costing you. I mean, that's what that interest rate is. People, maybe they don't recognize that the interest is just fundamentally the cost of what it is to borrow this money. And maybe people do get that pretty intuitively well enough that, look, as I repay this debt back, I repay the full principal of what I was initially lent plus all my interest charges over those years. And what does that account to be? And look, I certainly wouldn't advocate for anybody to take debt out as a path of wealth accumulation. Like, acquiring debt in and of itself won't build wealth for sure. And having the drag of debt can be problematic, especially if those interest charges are high. But it's not just to have debt does not need to be the number one priority in your situation to pay that off. I don't know, to each his own. We have clients in which they've wanted to pay off their home mortgage before they saved or invested in the markets. And that's just what they wanted. And it's like, well, okay. I mean, each person gets to decide this for themselves, right?
There is that very important question of like sleeping at night. And I know my opinion can come off strong, but you're right, Ben. Everyone needs to do what feels right in their situation. But for people to just have this blanket feeling that debt is wrong and debt is bad, I don't think that's as beneficial as having a little bit more of a nuanced approach to it.
Sure. So why did we talk about debt? Maybe just bring this back into FI and entrepreneurship, and the metrics for FI is, especially if you are pursuing financial independence via rental properties, you're almost certainly going to be taking out debt as part of that process. And there's a legitimate question, even if you aren't doing financial independence via rental properties, maybe you just have a mortgage. Should I pay this mortgage off as part of my pursuit to FI? And is it really a good use of my money to pay this off? That's one question. Another one that I want to make sure we drill into is there is certainly a problem where we have too much debt, especially as it relates to your income. And so that can obviously become problematic. We've taken out too much debt and we're struggling to make those payments. The right amount of debt to have for a person's situation, I suppose we just turn to our financial planning software as a way to answer those questions. I think it varies some amongst a client's specific situation, what's going on, stability of their income and the like. But we don't want to let the debt, we've got too big of a house, too big of a car, too much car, keep us from achieving other goals. That's my general barometer of knowing when debt's gotten to be too much is, can I still achieve other goals that are only more important to me? Or am I now enslaved to this payment and it's gobbling up all my cash flow? That's when debt becomes problematic. Is it stalling out your financial situation? And so it's really a cash flow question in my mind in terms of how to resolve or handle debt more than it is simply having it. Do you agree? Does this ultimately just come down to cash flow?
They say cash flow is king. And a lot of the times in our planning meetings and everything, we do go over the cash flow a lot. And cash flow will give you that freedom to pursue a number of different avenues. So, yeah, I really think that it does come down to cash flow. And, cash flow, how it also relates to the savings rate, what you've got coming in, what you're able to put away, and then the cash flow, what's free at the end of the day to not only enjoy your life, but pursue other things that are going to allow you to move forward in your long-term plans.
Well, I think what's kind of a consistent theme here that we'll pull out and then we can move on to another topic is as consumers, we can sometimes get too caught up with the expense and forget about the benefit. I mean, it's like going out to a nice meal and be like, oh man, that steak cost me $70. But okay, maybe it did, but it was a really good steak, or at least hopefully it was. It better be for $70, right? So, I mean, you are getting something here, right? I mean, okay, I've got all these interest charges. Like, oh gosh, it's costing me all this money. Like, I don't know, look around. What's your house? What's your car? I mean, you're getting something here for this, folks. I mean, you're not just, it's not just costing you money. There has been an exchange in this arrangement where you have something that's bigger and nicer than what you probably would have had otherwise. I wouldn't focus in on the cost. I would focus on just whether or not it's too much and if your situation can afford it. That's the deciding factor. Whether you have rental properties, whether you have the mortgage, I mean, should you maybe pay the mortgage off ahead as part of financial independence? Certainly could make sense because we don't want to necessarily have to keep making those mortgage payments into financial independence. And it could just be a good thing to have off our books.
It definitely opens things up in your financially independent life. To have a home that's free and clear and not have that on the books, that's just one much smaller nut that you've got to fulfill every month, right?
Well, and then maybe we get into taxation. If you have to cover that mortgage payment, that means you have to produce enough income to cover that mortgage payment. And many times that income is taxable to you. And as a matter of efficiency within the tax brackets, we want to keep you on the lower income side because you just don't get taxed as much. Which for FI, if you don't get taxed as much, you don't have to save as much. You can achieve financial independence a lot sooner at a lower income than at a higher income. And, we haven't plotted out just how much more drag or how much longer you have to work for a certain income level. That would be a fascinating study. But there's no question there's additional drag that you pick up for the higher amount of income. And I don't know what it is. Perhaps it could come out to where it's, for you to make an extra $20,000 a year to live off of, that's going to cost you another 2 years of work or something.
Mm-hmm.
That would be great to kind of figure out some general metrics. We don't have those in play, but there is a cost. The higher the income you want to have into retirement, the more it's going to require of savings of you, or the more it's going to require of work from you. Maybe you're cool with those costs. If you're not, then maybe we need to pull that income down. And are we really getting as much marginal usage out of that extra, that last 10 to 20,000? Is it worth these extra costs that we incur and the extra drag? Those would be my concerns as we can make these considerations for the debt. Just how much does it free you up and accelerate you to have that debt paid off and not have it be in the way any longer?
Sure.
All right. We still have to talk about the safe withdrawal rate and emergency funds.
Yes. We've been talking. So,
okay. Do you want to do a part 2 for another metric? I mean, the safe withdrawal rate would be great.
Yeah, I think like in part 2 territory, I'm not sure how many people are still awake if, putting people asleep in their cars or on their treadmills. If we have, that's pretty impressive. There's a couple of things that I still kind of want to get into a little bit. Definitely the safe withdrawal rate. We always talk about this 4% withdrawal rate. That's pretty well known, and that's got its own math behind it. But that rule, as time has gone on, is more and more questioned. Some people think it's too conservative. Other people think that it should be more dynamic. And I know Ben could talk about that for like another 12 to 15 minutes.
So because I think...
See?
Virginia here, our sound editor is going to be like, oh, you guys got to cut you guys off. Because the safe withdrawal rate could be a show in itself. So why don't we tag on to this, some research that's been done in the safe withdrawal rate, and maybe give at least an introduction to how perhaps you would give it distribution out of a portfolio. I don't want us to get too much into the weeds of all that because that could be a multi-series, but let's at least talk as another important consideration how all of financial independence works, at least in a conventional approach on the safe withdrawal rate. And just how that works. Like, what does that mean? Let's plan to commit an episode to that, Andrew.
Beautiful. Sounds good.
All right. Well, we're going to call that a wrap, folks. Thanks for joining us today. Hope you got some value out of that. Please look to the show notes for some resources that we've got attached there. And always stay tuned into the Financial Independence Entrepreneur, FI Entrepreneur.
FI Entrepreneur. Subscribe, like, click the buttons. You've got buttons, click them, follow us, refer us to your friends. We're here for you.
Yeah, you guys, I'm sure you love it. We love you. So thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. I hope you've had as much fun as we did. If you'd like to learn more about any of the subjects we spoke about, please visit our website for show notes, links, and more. Hit like, subscribe, or whatever button you've got in front of you to show some love. Remember, the information presented in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only.
Remember what Teddy Roosevelt said about the person who strives greatly. If he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Until next time, keep striving.
Thanks again, and be well.